Africa is not this promised land like everyone thinks it is, or the propaganda that's been spewed. I will speak my truth.
I'm just going to say it. This strong black woman attitude has got to stop.
Hello and welcome to the channel. If you are clicking for the first time, thank you for dropping by. The past few weeks have been very rough. In Africa, we have lost a couple of sisters, especially in the country of Gambia. Black British mother, just 60 years old. So these are not the best of times. When African diaspora, is trying to come home and facing these kinds of tragedies. In under 2 years already, we are looking at 6 sisters who've lost their lives, who've been removed. I want to look at a brother and a sister go black to Africa, and DIY house and farm. A gentleman and lady who are talking about the challenges of moving and living in Africa. The end goal is for the safety of our sisters who are returning home especially, but to every African diaspora person who's returning to Africa. They are looking at this from 2 different worlds. And I'm hoping that being on the continent, I can bring a third perspective to this story and look at what would likely work to just make it easier and better for our brothers and sisters who are coming to the continent. The loss of life is just too tragic, and my heart goes out to the families who've lost loved ones in Gambia and really the rest of Africa. This is AOB. Please check out the stories and let's have a chat at the end of each of these stories.
Why do African Americans choose to go to Africa knowing that there's so many things that have transpired here that we're unaware of? And most will say that there's this spiritual connection. I get a lot of comments where people have really romanticized things, like what's going on in my personal life. And I'm like, I'm living a real life just like anyone else. And the most difficult thing that I've been trying to do since I arrived was to erect a business. And this has given me a full-blown view on what it means to be a woman in Ghana in particular. And there's so many differences that we experience, especially within the realm of wanting to conduct business, because the American woman is she's coming with an independent mind state. And unfortunately, for years, there's been this propaganda that's toxic to think independently, but the universe put her in that position for a reason. So anyways, when you have an American woman that's like dealt with trauma and have a historical background of many different things, and she enters into a new environment, she'll have to adapt to this new one. And the new one doesn't necessarily want to adapt to her. So many times we often we're kind of like overlooking the difficulties that we do have when we're here. Not only that, are we dealing with that dynamic, there's so many like things pertaining to like social, meaning that most men don't want a woman saying things that are strong and or truthful and or authoritative, and so most American women are coming with that empowered concept of being. We also have this thing where people see Ghanaian men in particular, African men, as family men, not taking into consideration that there's a lot of things that come with that. Africa is not this promised land like everyone thinks it is, or the propaganda that's been spewed. I will speak my truth. When you come into an environment like this, all of your learnings can come tumbling down, can completely dissolve, can completely disintegrate, because it's not an environment where you can cultivate all of that empowerment and that strength. And I think to myself, is that a good thing? If something is good to you or good for you, should it bring you to tears, to where you feel emptiness and unhappiness? To where you feel disconnected without support? Where you feel more foreign than when you first arrived? So I can relate to these things, because guess what? I was born in America too. You have to be wise about your decisions as to why you're coming here. In all honesty, what happens to the American woman when she comes here, who she was, who she learned to be in her home country, everything that her parents taught her, her guardians taught her to empower her, to uplift her, to strengthen her through her toxic experiences, they are completely almost shattered when she comes into an environment like this because the women do not have the empowerment that your ancestors fought for. They are just now scratching at the surface.
My sister here is very strong about the role or the place of the black woman who's coming from the Western world. Raised differently, socialized differently, and obviously from the background of the trauma, our sisters have become really a strong voice in their own homes, a strong voice in the Western society because they have learned to stand up for what is right and for themselves. And really, even for those who are married, the black sister who is out there has got to step in a space where the African man is emasculated, but also a victim of very well calculated discrimination in the West that has put down the African person, the African man, essentially an endangered species in the West. So these sisters are saying we are different because we are molded by this environment that has been so difficult, so traumatizing for our ancestors and indeed for all of us growing up in these environments. And even for continental Africans who've had to travel to the West, they very soon realize that the place of the African person, even if you're born on the continent of Africa, you have got to have that conversation with your child about race, how to navigate that environment. Go Black to Africa certainly is saying you got your strong sisterhood going for you, but in Africa that might not work for you. It might actually work against you. So let's hear what he's got to say and chime in at the end of this.
I'm just going to say it. This strong black woman attitude has got to stop. It's got to stop. This whole mindset of thinking that you can just run around and skedaddle around the world and think you can do and act or say or just be without any threat against you is a poor judgment on oneself. Now, forgive me because I have a heart and a care for my sisters that I might sound like a little bit unsensitive for people's desires to go travel the world by themselves. Shout out to the women who have seen the importance, who understands the difference in the makeup of a male and a female. Shout out to my sisters who are here with their husbands in Africa, who I have heard many a stories. Some weren't on board with their husbands' desires to come to the motherland, or having a dream to come and start afresh, or remove him and his family out of a situation that he saw that was not good for them. But the sisters decided they were going to stand by their man, and they were going to hold down their position in the network of a family and be there. Peace and blessings to you sisters out there. That is a strong black woman. Nothing against my single sisters, not at all, because like I said, I got single nieces. I got one that's married. I got one sister who's married, one who is single. I have other family members and women that are single. My two daughters, they're single. But in this 57 years of understanding the purpose of a man and a woman, I get it. A woman stands to be a victim when she has no accountability, or let's just say no covering, no headship. She stands a greater risk of bodily harm, rape, murder, maim, taken advantage of.
The recent loss of Sister Shakina Chinedu in Gambia is a very strong reminder about the need for our Black diaspora sisters to be safe on the continent. And listening to this sister now, clearly there's a big challenge, because the strong-willed woman who's coming from the West finds a different environment that does not appreciate a very strong sister who is self-assertive, who wants to hold their own plus all that, you know, and that's a big, big challenge. The patriarchy in Africa runs homes, it runs businesses, it runs government. You look across Africa, perhaps in a place like Rwanda, you find representation of women nearly to a 50-50 basis. But the larger part of Africa is majorly male dominated. That tells you something, that in this society, the role of the man seems to supersede that of the woman. Gambia, for example, is a place where sex tourism is on a high scale. So you've got the older ladies and still even those who are much younger coming to Gambia, specifically just to meet the young men and have a good time. On the reverse, the young men are seeing these women as wallets, as their economic gateway, as the security to their future, if you wish, which is a sad state of affairs. It tells us something about the society of Gambia, that poverty is so prevalent that young people are lost for options. You are often seen, for example, if you are a different color, if you're white, skin the color of money. If you are black, you're still seen as the foreigner who is moneyed, who is loaded. They're looking at your dollars, they're looking at your sterling pounds, they're looking at your euros. If you are moving to a country, one of the most basic things you need to think about is the politics. What has been the political stability of that country in the past, say, 20, 30 years? Has this country suffered many coups? What is a government changeover? Do they have regular elections? And this may seem far-fetched. It rarely occurs to most of us when you're traveling to a place. But those are the realities. Gambia has been ruled by previously an autocrat who was there for a good 30 plus years. The man who took over in 1994, Yahya Jammeh, stayed in power for a good 20, maybe 22 years. Before, in the final election, he lost, tried to cling on to power, but eventually was kicked out. So you actually find that the environment is one that has a certain element of uncertainty, of instability because of the politics. And the bad politics also means that the economy is adversely affected. The economy is adversely affected. Young people are disenfranchised. Young people are agitated. So considering what has happened in their environment, that they have political elites who run affairs of the nation as they wish, then you find that the young people are also bound to take the law into their own hands. They are bound to look for avenues to make money. They'll make money off the sisters who come to the continent. They will make money out of corruption because the standard has been set by the political elite, the ruling class of most of these African countries. The patriarchal system, the chiefdoms that operate in some of these countries, means that the power hierarchy has got to be respected, that the man is the final word. So if you're a sister born and raised in Britain or in the US, and your idea of self-sufficiency is that you are an independent sister, you've got to hold your own, you've got your good education, you're earning your money, you can have your own control, you soon get a major culture shock when you travel to some of these locations, because you find that your place of independence and self-assertion is no longer wanted. So Africa can drain you if you are not aware of this. Finding love on the continent is a challenge because that difference, that cultural difference is huge. Perhaps the person that you are likely to find as your partner in life is an African brother who has got a broad worldview, very savvy, well exposed, generally well educated, perhaps well traveled, so that their imagination is not limited to the boundaries of their culture, to the boundaries of their small villages and their country only. So these are realities. Go Black to Africa is saying, don't bring your strong sister attitude to the continent. You are bound to ruffle feathers. You are bound to call attention to yourself. You are bound to expose yourself as an independent person, and especially if you're single, then you become an easy target. But in terms of physical location, ask yourself, am I moving to a very deeply rural area, which is bound to be very traditional and culturally entrenched in terms of how they run their affairs, the roles within the homes, the girls are given these duties, the boys are given these duties, and these become part of their social fabric, and they're raised like this so that everybody falls into place. Tradition, culture, and all these things combined with religion are very potent in many African countries. The Gambia that has been on the spotlight lately is largely a Muslim country. In Islam, as you would know, you can be married to more than one wife, 2, 3, 4. So that tells you that even the brothers who are in that country are socialized, at least religiously, to know that that is an option that they have. So you coming from the West with your Western ideals and the thinking that it's one man, one woman, you might find this offensive and you might want to judge. But for them, it has worked for all these years. They don't see why they should change it. Some of those being things that will offend you, perhaps, as Go Black to Africa is suggesting, zip it, keep it to yourself, find a way to navigate and engage without necessarily getting too much into the people's business, pointing out things that in general do not even affect you directly. But there are things that naturally as a human being, if they border on human rights, they are bound to affect you. So these are things that make life really, really difficult on the continent of Africa. And a number of sisters have packed the bags and gone back, frustrated, and those are things that you have to really, really consider. There's so many we can talk about. I think anybody else can share in the comments some of the challenges you may have experienced, and even brothers and sisters on the continent of Africa, perhaps from different regions. Tell us the experience of friends or those from diaspora coming to the continent, those you have interacted with, but also within your own countries. What are the things that people should look out for? What can you advise those who are coming to the continent to do, to be safe, to enjoy their time on the continent, to maybe relocate and live here for good? It's not one size fits all. It will work differently for different people. But we want you guys to be safe. We want you guys to find meaning and peace on the continent of Africa. This is our home, but it is also your home. Your ancestors came from here. And really, we can do better to make things much better, to give you guys a softer landing. Share your comments, share your thoughts. Let's build each other here. And I will share links for Go Black to Africa, as well as my sister here, especially the stories that are featured here, so that we can learn from the depth of their own experiences and advice. They seem to be speaking very differently, but ultimately they want safety for those who are coming to the continent of Africa. That is a wish from me as well. And again, to the families that have lost loved ones, we say in Swahili, pole sana. Our hearts go out to you guys for the loss that you have suffered. We just hope that those that we have lost remind us that as Africa, we need to do a lot more for the continent, for all of Africa's children. If you're here for the first time, this resonates with you, you'd like to join us on this journey, I would be much delighted if you can subscribe and ring that bell, as well as share with anybody who might find this of interest. We share analyses of what's happening in Africa in a truthful way, not sugarcoating it. Once the fluff is done, once it's all over with, after your initial visit, you have to face the realities of the continent. That's what we hope to do here. So I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for staying on to the end, and we'll see you again in the next story. This is AOB.